You guys ever wonder what it would be like to date a sentient gelatinous mass of Smucker's jelly? Buckle up, we're talking about slime girls. Y'all have been pretty down bad for slimes in the comment section, so this is your just desserts. This is your 2 cents. I'll put my personal thoughts aside for later, but just know that I get it. I can see the importance of having a slime girlfriend and why it blew up in the last couple of years, because they can seemingly do anything. In fictional media, they're everywhere. Like, reincarnated as a slime, slaying slimes for 300 years, Sue from Monster Musume, and that's just tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of them I'm forgetting. But D&D campaigns, gelatinous cubes, the Blob movie. I'll get into their abilities a little later too, but they can shapeshift, they can change their texture, they're indestructible, which means you could be rough with one. And overall, they look cute. At least their 2D versions do. So imagine my surprise when I do research on quite possibly one of the most famous and most desirable demi-humans out there, and find virtually nothing. Much like their internal bone structure, or Our Chances of Getting No Game No Life Season 2, mythos on this thing does not exist, and there's no creature that you could really base it off of, which is usually how I do my research for these videos. Maybe with a few exceptions, but as I'm going to go into, they don't really make a lot of sense. If you're new to the channel, hi. This is a series where it's basically what it says on the tin. This is a series where I tell you not to date some fictional character, and like 90% of you come back at me in the comments saying you're going to do it anyway. What I usually do for the beginning of these videos is I try to give you the lore of the demi-human in question, so that way you have a little bit of history behind it that relates to the real world. Only for the slime girl in particular, this one's going to be tough because, as I mentioned before, there's no mythos to base it on. Slimes are really a 20th century product that blew up in the 21st century and just have no previously established history behind it. At least that's what I thought, and I'll get into that in a bit. After that, I summarize their powers and abilities. I then tell you how I think that they would coexist with humans, which is usually a really fun segment. And then I sum it up with my personal thoughts, which in the case of the slime girl just boils down to, is it worth it? I'd also like to add that I am by no means a comprehensive researcher, or a sane person for that matter. I'm just doing this for gits and shiggles, so don't cite me as factual because I might be wrong here. I also smell jelly all over my face, and it's starting to tickle. It's starting to harden too. So as I mentioned before, there is no mythos that you can really base the slime on. There's no mythical creature that you could base it off of that exists in our world. There are some things, like one of my subscribers told me that I should look into something called the Nupeppo, which is a Japanese yokai that's a walking blob, which sounds promising on paper, but then you look up a picture of one of these things and it looks like a blob of flesh. It's still a blob, I guess, but do you honestly want your slime girl to be related to one of these things? And I know, technically you could say we are all walking balls of flesh, but think back to, say, anime, right? Would you say that Rimuru Tempest is a walking ball of flesh? Would you say that Sue is a walking ball of flesh? No, they're slimes. Like, they are a gelatinous mass that is not whatever the hell this thing is. I just burped. Whatever the hell this thing is, I don't want it relating to my slime girlfriend. There is another creature that you can kind of loosely base a slime off of from Greek mythology called an undine. There are undines in the Monster Musume universe as well, and spoiler for anybody who cares, it's not really that big of a spoiler anyway. Sue's mother, go figure, she comes from a mother, is an undine. And supposedly an undine can create the slime race, or at least this one did. I don't know how the biology works. I really want to, but I am really confused here. But apparently that's how slimes are created in the Monster Musume universe, and then they can kind of just split like cells, so they can go full-on mitosis after they're created. That's all well and good for Monster Musume lore, but in the real world, it makes a little less sense, because undines are virtually nymphs. Nymphs are a creature that really deserve their own video, but essentially just imagine an element and then say nymph afterwards, and that's pretty much what they are. They're elemental creatures that control whatever noun that they're given. So Sue's mother, in this case, is a water nymph. She's able to manifest water. You have a fire nymph that can manipulate fire. You have snow nymphs that help it snow. Wow, a plant nymph, I wonder what they control, and etc., etc. The point I'm trying to get across is that Undines are their own creature. They're not slimes. You could potentially say that there is a slime nymph, but in the context of the ancient Greeks, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they had a conception of what slime was. So to say that they had a slime nymph, or that a slime nymph existed, would kind of be, like, to me at least, would be like saying, oh yeah, there's also a Toyota nymph out there. It doesn't really comply. It doesn't make sense. And overall, the Nupeppo nor the Undine really have anything to do with the creation of the slime girl that we know today. And that leads me on to the history that I could finally start talking to you about now. Before I continue, I want to give a quick shout out to fellow YouTuber King of Candor, because if it wasn't for his video on the history of slimes, I would have no idea what I was doing. I was pretty lost in the beginning of this research when, the no mythos thing. So when I tried to look up history of slimes, there it was, right there, just a video that had the encyclopedia of about most things that I needed. And his channel seems to be about building worlds for D&D, and he gives you a in-depth, well-researched collection of videos that go into D&D lore and the creatures behind them. So by all means, if you're interested in that, then feel free to give his channel a shot. But again, I just have to thank him for giving me just a starting line for how I should cover slimes. Here is my declaration. I believe that the slime girl that we know today came from, or at least was inspired by, amoebas and a natural phenomenon that takes place in our world called star jellies. To give you a small rundown of amoebas, at least the way that I can regurgitate to you, they're essentially small, single-cell organisms that are blobs within themselves. They use their blobby appendages to snag other blobs and then eat them and grow bigger. We're going to put the amoebas on hold for now, but I promise they'll come back later. I want to talk about star jellies, which is what I believe is the more important part to the whole slime jigsaw puzzle that we've got going on here. Slime jellies are something that we believe have existed for centuries. At least that's what we're led to believe because of written documentation that we have that go as far back as the medieval era. Given how weird and translucent these things look, it's not hard to see why medieval peasants thought that it would be a good idea to document these, and also why some of them in particular thought that they had healing properties to a degree. Legit, some people would take this and they would rub it on their skin because they thought that it would make them healthier. It's at this point in my research that I'd like to add that there are people who thought this thing was so weird that they wanted to make poetry about it. I found a stanza from 1656 from a guy named Henry Moore who had this to say about the strange ooze that he found in his backyard. That the stars eat, that those falling stars, some call them, which are found on the earth in the form of trembling jelly, are their excrement. I don't know if I'd necessarily call that a poem. It might not have been. But back then, they didn't call them star jellies. That's a newfangled term that we came up with. Back then, I still don't really know what they called them, but they did think that it was star poop. More specifically, they thought it was some weird substance that only came about during meteor showers, so that led to them to conclude that this had to be star excrement of some kind that came from the heavens, and also had healing properties. There were legitimately people that went hunting for this stuff, thinking that it had medicinal properties of some kind that could be used to heal wounds, or shrink swelling, or maybe was good moisturizer. I mean, I honestly can't say for certain. I haven't wiped star poop on myself, so I can't say that this thing is effective or that it works. All I can say is that medieval people certainly thought so, and to me that just gives me the image of like this medieval farm boy that broke his arm, and he goes to his dad like, "Papa, I have broken my arm farming." So they go to a clinic in town and they just say, "Alright, I know how to fix it. Where's the star poop?" People are just a different breed back then. After making fun of them, I now realize that people in the 21st century would probably be just as eager to do that, which only gets grosser when you find out what this thing could be. For the longest time, scientists believed that star jellies were ground-up prey that predators would hack up like they were owl pellets. In particular, frogs, because I don't know why they were so specific with this. They thought that the innards of a frog, specifically the reproductive organs and the egg sacs, would not be dissolved so easily. So when whatever ate them coughed them back up, Attack on Titan style, they would come out looking kind of funny, maybe a little translucent, but they wouldn't look like the puffed up slime. They would kind of just look more like owl pellets until they came into contact with rainwater, where they would start to swell and then look like star jellies. Which, would you love your slime girlfriend if she was a rolled up ball of froggy fallopian tubes? In recent memory, scientists have come up with a better theory, and a more accurate one, that says that the slime jelly is quite possibly the result of a type of algae. A cyanobacterium that, once it comes into contact with rainwater, it then starts to swell up and looks a lot like jelly. So science seems to say that my slime girl might come from something more plant-based, and I'm okay with that. Whether or not you believe this is just a predatory owl pellet or star poop or a plant is completely up to you, but I will say that the algae that the slime jelly is supposed to be based off of, the specific cyanobacterium, it can grow just about anywhere if given the right climate. So that means it can grow from forests to just your own rutted, gravelly driveway, which just so happens to be where two cops find it in the year 1950 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In the early fall of 1950, two officers are on patrol in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when they notice something fall from the sky. When they go to investigate, they describe what they find as a pulsating purple jelly about 6 feet in diameter that for some reason seemed to move and vibrate on its own, as if it was a living creature. Later reports would say that these officers saw crystallized structures inside of this thing, and its body started to emanate steam, in which they called for backup immediately. Which, yeah, if I saw some weird purple jelly fall from the sky and then start emanating steam and move like it had a life of its own, I think I'd call for backup too. We then had 4 officers on the scene that were able to confirm the story of the 2 men and explain they saw what they thought they saw, to which one of them actually put their hand in it and grabbed it, and the slime began to dissolve immediately after he held it in his hands. Newspapers would continue to cycle the story of this weird purple goo that fell from the sky, and would do it to such a degree that it caught the attention of a Hollywood director that used it as inspiration for their movie in 1958 titled The Blob. Sorry, the camera died mid-shoot, so I took the opportunity to shower, hence the change of shirt. Anyway, what was I talking about? The Blob? The Blob is super important to slime lore because this is what ended up inspiring everything else down the line. As for those of you curious, The Blob is intended to be a horror movie of just a gelatinous mass that eats a person, gets a taste for human flesh, and then grows until it can't stop eating. This is also the first time a slime was shown as a horror movie villain, or just like a horror element at all. Because, like I said, people wrote poetries about the slime jelly, but there were also just descriptions. Like, each one of them either compared the star jelly to poop or just talked about how weird it looked. Nobody ever thought that this thing was evil by any means until this movie came out. You have other stories, and I feel the need to mention that there are things like the Lovecraftian Shoggoths back in the 30s, where Lovecraft created these Cthulhu-like monsters that were said to be mountains of mayhem or mountains of madness. But those look like physical octopuses, among other things. I don't know if I would call them slimes, technically. And then there was another story called The Ooze that was made by a man named Anthony M. Rodd, but they were fighting an octopus, like straight up. They called it The Ooze, and they were fighting a tentacled octopus, so that doesn't count. That's not a slime. The Blob, however, was a slime that was inspired by slime jellies, as we can confirm, as one of the producers said that they were inspired to write the script around that event in 1950, where the 2 cops found that star jelly fall from the sky. But wait, I'm sure you're wondering, how can you turn a slime jelly into a horror movie icon? It does nothing, and it dissolves when you touch it, and it just kinda moves a little bit and can't do anything. Which was certainly a pickle for the longest time. But wouldn't it be the darndest thing if there was a single-celled organism out there that we can loosely base a slime off of to make into a horror movie icon? Thus, the amoeba makes its grand entrance, and the screenwriters do their best to try to Frankenstein the amoeba and the slime jelly together. What they ended up coming up with was a creature with a slime jelly-like body, but with an amoeba-like attitude that only knows to grow and consume without stopping. Which is absolutely horrifying, and I don't know if I want that as a girlfriend. That is until the 70s, when in 1974, a man named Gary Gynax, who is most famous for being the co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons, had an idea to create a creature that he referred to as the Gelatinous Cube. And yes, it is confirmed that the Gelatinous Cube was inspired by the blob that was made in 1958.
And it didn't just stop at D&D either. Nearly at the same time, in 1976, the Mattel Toy Company, which is the same toy company that made Barbie, rolls out a new ooze-like toy to children that they dub Slime. They would soon follow that up with a slime board game that, I guess, kids would try to manipulate the game pieces to have them run away from a giant slime monster. I don't know, I didn't look into it. The point is, slime is becoming more and more of a household thing, and now that the word slime is out there, people are starting to refer to ooze and jelly and all sorts of other items like this as slimes. Not to be outdone, D&D also creates a whole line of slimes that have different types and variations, including one that can shapeshift into different members of your family, or I think people that it's eaten in the past, so that way it can try to trick you into getting closer and then snatch you like a Venus flytrap. So you've no doubt noticed a theme that's been going on here. We have a movie that is about a horrifying man-eating slime. We have an RPG that has horrifying slime creatures in it. We have a board game where one of the sole intentions is to try to run away from the slime. The reputation that slimes have at this point is a horrifying rep. That is until the horrifying slime monster falls into the hands of a country that is so good at doing this, making things cute. In 1986, the Japanese gaming company Chunsoft wanted to create an RPG that they would later dub Dragon Quest. I don't know all that much about the game, but what I do know is that they wanted to create a bunch of creatures for the game that were inspired by Western folklore, including stuff like dragons, dwarves, elves, etc., and slimes. They trusted their creature designs to their character designer, who was a pretty big balls manga artist at the time for his recent creation in 1984 named Dragon Ball. When working on the slimes in particular, this character designer was originally told to make the slimes look terrifying, to make them look like Western slimes, that being man-eating monsters that are muck and gum and not appealing to the eye. And he was originally going to do so, but this man had a light bulb go off in his brain and decided to do something a little differently. Rather than make the slime look like a squished piece of gum that you'd find on the sidewalk, this character designer decided to give the slime a goofy-looking face and eyes that made it look cute, rather than being disturbing and or terrifying. This ended up being a huge success that ended up turning the slime into the mascot for the Dragon Quest game, and changing the course of history for slimes as we know them today. You piecing the dots together? Because this is correct. Akira Toriyama can be credited as the sole reason why slimes, for the first time in history, are now seen as a goofy race rather than something to be afraid of. This guy created Dragon Ball and created the foundation that gave us the modern-day slime girl.
Rest in peace, Toriyama. At this point, the floodgates are open and the slime can be just about anything, but is mostly now fixated on a really adorable-looking mascot that people see and just go, huh, you know, what if we made this, but more human-like? And so, as the years continue, we have more and more examples of different slime creatures, some of them looking more humanoid than others. Apparently in Sailor Moon, there was I think there was a slime girl called Jamanin, if I remember, who, I guess she was pretty big, I don't know. If you're wondering what's going on in America at this time, slime is getting the best PR it's ever had when Nickelodeon takes over and uses slime as a part of their gimmick back in 1979, which... Did you guys know Nickelodeon was nearly half a century old at this point? Oh god, I feel like a dinosaur now. But anyway, back in Japan, slime is becoming more humanoid. Yeah, that's where I was. So it continues with the trend until finally in 2012, Monster Musume becomes a thing. And Sue the Slime Girl is I don't want to say it's a household name, but she's about the cutest darn slime girl that slime ever had, so that's the best PR that slime girls are going to get. I'm sure that there's a couple of other dating sims that come here and there that have slime girls in them. I didn't look into individual ones. I don't know of any popular ones, so let me know if there is one or if you have a favorite one in the comments below. But from there, slimes just have an explosion. Like, from 2015 onwards, slime girls just become a really huge thing. There's so many DeviantArt accounts that have pictures of slime girls, and the anime community can't get enough of them, which, you know, again, I understand the appeal, but wow. Speaking of the anime community, you would have shows that surround slimes, like that of Reincarnated as a Slime, or Monster Girls, or I've Been Slaying Slimes for 300 Years, to name a few. I'm sure that there are plenty others, but doesn't matter, because we are now in the modern day, and I have officially covered the history of Slime Girls. Oh my god, that took forever. like, editing the video is probably going to be like an hour's worth of history. I am sorry for that, but holy cow. I did it, Sue! I did it, Rimuru! I freaking did it! I did it! I did it! I did the slime girl! I did it! For those of you keeping track at home, we are now on shirt number 3. Multi-day project, baby! So what does the history of the slime tell us about what kind of powers and abilities they have? Well, still nothing solid. Solid. It's no guarantee, but I have pulled out 4 major abilities that the slime could realistically have if it existed in our world. So sorry, no magic, they can't use it here. Ability number 1, shapeshifting. Obviously, they can manipulate their slime to take any shape of anything that they want. It could be from whatever they consume, but I imagine that all they need to do is just look at it and they can do it, so score 1 for deepfakes, I guess. I believe they would also have the ability to permeate their texture, and by that I mean they could change their texture to look from slime to looking more like whatever it is they're mimicking. So, for example, a Ditto from Pokemon, whenever it transforms into something, it doesn't look purple, right? It looks like the same color and texture of the Pokemon that they're trying to copy, just with a Ditto smile. At least I think that's the case, I don't know, I'm pretty illiterate when it comes to that. Another power that all slimes probably have in common? Consuming things for protein. And just about anything for that matter. That being just other living creatures, to just drunk, to trash, just, I guess, anything they can find. Because every slime that I have come across in fiction, I guess with the exception of Ditto from Pokemon, consumes just about anything and can use it for energy. So, superpower. And I'll just put it out there right now, that is my main proponent as to why you shouldn't get a slime girlfriend, because 50-50 shot, and I'm being very generous with those numbers, you're probably going to get one that dissolves things on contact. Stick anything in that slime girl, and you're probably going to lose it. It's like the same rules as Russian roulette. I mean, sure, in that game, maybe it's a 1 out of 6 chance, but that's still a 1 out of 6 chance that I'm going to get offed, so if I take the 50-50 shot of whether or not my slime girlfriend is going to end my lineage, I'm going to decide not to do that, and I am going to instead decide on some other monster girl. And finally, the last thing that I was able to find was slimes are very durable. It's ironic because I think they're usually considered just level 1 creatures, just really easy to defeat and things that you just grind to level up. But for stuff like the Blob and for other fictional slime characters, they seem pretty invulnerable. If a slime is attacking you and you have a gun on hand and you're shooting at it, it's just going to absorb that. It's not going to put it down, because that's just not how it works. And let's say you've been isekai'd to a fantasy world where slimes exist, right? Who's to say that when you plunge that sword into the slime, it doesn't dissolve and you're left with a metal stub? What's to say that that slime isn't very agile and very good at manipulating its body, so that way it loops around and smacks you upside the head? I think that slimes are a lot more durable than people give them credit for, so I'm going to say that they have invulnerability as well. That's not to say that they're unstoppable, they do have their weaknesses. So, in The Blob from 1958, how they're able to stop that is not with guns or any conventional weapons, but by realizing that you can freeze it. And so, they somehow managed to capture it. I'm not sure how, I didn't see the movie. But they bring it to Antarctica, where it freezes and can't grow, and it just stays there. So realistically, your best shot at defending yourself against a slime monster in the real world would probably be a fire extinguisher, since there's CO2 inside them, and that, when it exits the fire extinguisher, gets really cold. It essentially turns into dry ice, so there's that. That is not a call to arms. Do not attack your slime girlfriend with a fire extinguisher. You will eventually run out of it, and she will eat it, and then eat you. I guess now's the part where I talk about its Monster Musume counterpart. So according to the bio on Monster Musume's version of the slime is a lineal race whose bodies are composed entirely of a gelatinous substance. This particular species is a rare, almost unheard of variety of slime that mimics the appearance of a human woman. The slime species itself, however, originates from a greater species known as undines, which we talked about earlier. Those are the nymphs that I don't think have anything to do with slimes. In regards to their psychological attributes, slimes are able to speak and understand human languages. However, they talk like little children. So to clarify, in the show, Sue doesn't know how to speak at first. She's just kind of living existence, and it isn't until later on that she figures out how to do that and then talks a little bit more often. And I imagine, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit, that if slimes were to be introduced to our world, they would act very much the same way. They wouldn't know our language. They would kind of just start off as a new spawn in our world where it's up to us to teach them how to be more humanoid, or be more slime if that's your thing. There's also a thing here that says that if they take in a lot of water, they can become intelligent. So, for example, if your slime girlfriend takes in a whole bunch of water and then gets bigger, they can become a big sister archetype or a Dami Mommy, so good luck with that, soldier. While capable of absorbing almost anything, slimes need at least water and some protein to survive. When a slime is low on food, it will seek out the closest source of easily absorbed liquefied protein in an attempt to consume. And before you ask, yes, male reproductive cells have protein in them. That is so unethical, and I am going to move on. Slimes are also able to grow in size when absorbing water, mainly through their hair-shaped tentacles or by drinking it. It is implied that exposure to large bodies like lakes or rivers could be fatal or at very least be dangerous to the slime. Some slimes can avoid this weakness by turning their bodies into a gel-like form that keeps them from getting diluted. So that's another thing. If you throw a slime into the ocean, I'm sure that they would dilute. It does make sense, and I imagine that that is another real-world weakness. So that means no water park dates, not unless she's wearing a full-body swimsuit that keeps the water out. Slimes have very wet skin, which could also be a membrane that holds their body liquid. It makes it difficult to wear clothing other than a raincoat and rain boots. This skin will melt if exposed to outside water, like rain. On the other hand, too much dryness will shrink them down and starve them of moisture. Their semi-liquid bodies are vulnerable to freezing temperatures, just like the blob, though it is unknown if the cold can do more harm than just rendering them immobile. I am willing to bet that it can. The article goes on to say other things that Sue can do, like read minds, which I don't think that slimes in the real world can do that. I think she's the only slime that I know of that can. There were other things like they have a core that if they dissolve down to their core, that is their lifeline, so make sure that that core is safe, or if it's destroyed or damaged, it could be fatal for them. There was also another thing about how there are different types of slimes out there. So you have ones that are mostly made out of water, you have ones that are made out of poison, you got ones that are acidic, so they dissolve just about anything that they touch. Which, now that I say that out loud, I think that 50-50 shot I mentioned earlier is more like a third of them are actually safe to touch. So proceed with caution, fellas. Or maybe follow my advice and don't date the slime, because I don't think that it would work, and I don't think that they would coexist with us very well. So how do I think the slime would coexist with humans? I don't think it would be very well. But not for the reason you think. I don't think that once they integrate in society, it's going to be an all-out war between slimes and man. But I think ultimately what would do us in the end is ignorance, and a lack of knowledge for how to take care of each other. Coming into contact with them is going to be very dangerous, because even if you are dealing with one that mostly is made out of water with a skin-like membrane, all it takes is one happy accident to drown you, or one curious slime girl looking into the toilet to drown her. So, safe-proofing is the big problem here, and I don't trust humanity to do their due diligence to keep their slime girlfriends safe. As far as what powers they have, keep in mind, we now live in an age where people are afraid of AI and deepfakes and copies, so if you introduce a slime girl into that mix where one of their biggest attributes is being able to copy people, what do you think that's going to do to their reputation? To that end, I see governments doing heavy restrictions on what a slime can and can't do. For example, copy politicians. Like, what if I ask my slime girl to do a copy of Trump and then recreate Two Girls, One Cup? It will open up a lot of problems. Then again, maybe you can use them as bodyguards now? Or, like, you can use them as body doubles for in case situations are too dangerous and you need a body double. I guess that's one thing that could work for slimes. But for the most part, I think that the idea of shape-shifting is going to be a really hard thing to tackle and has a lot of restrictions and regulations for, on top of the average person trying to care for their slime girlfriend and making sure that they don't do something like look into the toilet and drown themselves. But if you manage to pass all those hurdles, maybe dating a slime won't be so bad, because I imagine that they're the same shape as a person, so you can take them just about anywhere, so long as you give them proper clothing and protection. So that could be anything. Camping, movie theater date, library date, like anywhere, really. You can go just about anywhere. So long as you look after them and make sure that they don't go nuts, then the world is really your oyster. So what does that mean for me? What do I think of the slime? Well, I wouldn't say that they're my go-to. They're not my favorite, but I understand the appeal. I just don't know enough about them to safely say that, yes, I would want to date a slime. Because it seems like 7 times out of 10, I guess, that slime girl is going to be dangerous in some way, whether it be poisonous or acidic, or it would try to harm me in some way, shape, or form. By accident, mind you. I'm sure they wouldn't do it on purpose. It just seems like too much of a risk. That said, Sue's really cute, and I like her, and if I were to go on a date with her, like, I'd imagine that we'd go on a picnic together, because just eating seems like a fun thing that she and I can do and really get behind. I'm a real big foodie, if you couldn't tell by the shirt. On that note, I am also a very irresponsible person, because I know that if I got a slime girlfriend, the first thing that I'd want to do is have her masquerade as celebrities, so that way when we walk around town, I seem a lot cooler than I actually am. I would definitely want to get into mischief with her. I would also like to cuddle, but that is the issue, because, as I said earlier, all it takes is one happy accident for me to drown to death between those glistening, gelatinous thighs. Which, you know what, there are worse ways of going out. But back to that point about slimes being too unknown and unpredictable, and us not really knowing too much about them, it just leaves me with a bunch of questions, because before dating a slime girlfriend, there's just a few things that I want to know first. For example, body temperature. Is it cold in there, or, like, can they warm themselves up? Because if it ends up being the former, that'd be pretty uncomfortable, no? If she is cold inside, is it unethical of me to ask her to shapeshift into a cooler so that way she can carry our sandwiches when we go out for a picnic? When you're finished doing the deed, does it float around like a lava lamp? If my slime girlfriend splits into 2 different sentient slimes, would the second one be my daughter, or would it be her twin sister? If I wear her as body armor, am I then immune to fall damage? Can she wear me as body armor? Will that make her immune to fall damage? Also, if she does that, how is she getting in there?
Honey, why are you wearing 3 pairs of pants?
Because I'm not taking any chances, darling.
Like I said, too many unknowns, but honestly, to any of you that are still willing to date the slime girl, I think that you should be treated as brave pioneers, just braving the unknown, going to a place where no man has gone before. That just about covers everything about the slime girl from my end. I've said about everything that I've wanted to say. It seems like a lot of you are really into the slime, so I hope that I did it justice for you guys. It was a pretty interesting read, and I've never had to try to establish a lore using history rather than a mythical creature before, so this was challenging to say the least, but we did it. We actually got there, and I didn't think that it was going to happen, but success. If you're still watching at this point in the video, you are a madman, or madwoman. But honestly, I'm just amazed at you guys, because I made a community post about the slime, saying that that was the next one that I was going to do, and the response that I got from all of you was an additional 200 subscribers, which... it was just a post, I didn't even make a video yet, and it doesn't feel like I deserved those, but... I'll just say this, again, thank you. It really means a lot. If any of you have an idea of where you'd like to take a slime girl out on a date, then please let me know in the comments, because you guys come up with really creative ideas. Last video for the centaurs, I said that it wasn't possible to take a centaur to a movie theater, but a lot of you brought up that I could take her to a drive-in theater date, which is something I never would have thought of in a million years, so you guys are much smarter than me. You guys have been preparing for this a lot longer than I have. You are geniuses, and I'm sure that you'll also come up with great answers for this. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Sayonara, suckers.